Hi everybody, I'm Larry Asher, the director of SVC, and I would like to walk you through the course track for our hybrid UX design, content design certificate program. First, let me explain how to even look at this graphic. You'll see some large squares, and each of those represent a 5-week evening class. They typically meet 5 consecutive nights from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Pacific time. And again, they meet once a week for 5 weeks. You'll see some rectangles, or at least you'll see one. That's a 10-week evening class, and that's pretty much on the same schedule, 10 consecutive evenings from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Pacific time, 10 weeks in a row. You'll also see some smaller squares, and they're overlapped, and what those represent are 6-hour Saturday workshops. They're 6 hours because they consist of 2 consecutive 3-hour sessions. So on one Saturday, you'll meet for 3 hours. You'll come back again the next Saturday to complete the workshop for another 3 hours. And below those, you'll see some rectangles. Those are 90-minute presentations. They're all about career skills and some advice to help you with your job hunting. So let's dive in and look at this a little bit more in detail. First, let's take a look at the core classes in the track. You'll notice that the first 5 are all connected by a dotted line. What that's all about is a single project that you will carry with you from class to class to class for those first 5 classes. That's significant because if you look in any company that's developing digital products, be it a website or an app, these are the same processes they're going through. So it's pretty much an exact replication of what's going on out there in the work world. Starts with user research because in the practice of user-centered design, you don't do anything without consulting with the user first. The next class is information architecture. This is a class where we look into how do you organize all the information or content that's going to be in an app or a website in a logical way. What's the right order? What's the right flow? And how do you create a hierarchy so the most important information is more readily found than the less important information? The next class in that series is interaction design. Interaction design is truly the nuts and bolts of UX design, and it's something that whether you're going to be a UX designer or a content designer, you have to understand it. The UX designers, because you're placing these UI elements or UI controls in your sites or apps, and as a content designer, you have to know about it because you're going to be writing the words that explain to the user how to make this thing work. After you've done that, you'll move into the prototyping class. Now, prototyping is something that's really advanced quite a bit over the last few years because with software like Figma, you can take your designs and make a very workable interactive prototype out of them. So you can simulate what the finished product is going to look like, and it's a pretty close simulation. This becomes important because of that next class, usability testing. In usability testing, you're going to go back to those users, perhaps the same ones you interviewed in the user research class, and ask them to perform some tasks with your website or app, at least with the prototype of it, and see how they do. Where do they get hung up? What's confusing to them? How long does it take them to complete a task? And so in usability testing, that's where we unearth problems in our design or assumptions about our design. We can go back and fix them and then repeat some of these steps again. So those 5 classes totally simulate what goes on in professional UX studios and content studios across the world, and you'll be doing them here. After those classes, you'll move into Capstone. Now, it's presented here as 2 5-week classes. It's a single class that covers 10 weeks with a break in between. In that class, we will bring in usually a couple clients, typically a nonprofit and a for-profit, and they're going to lay out a real problem for you. So you'll have this chance to interact with a client, to interview them, to understand what they're trying to solve, and then you and your classmates will go to work solving it. Towards the end of that class, you'll make a presentation back to those clients, and that's a pretty valuable experience right there. On rare occasion, I don't want to promise that this happens all the time, but on a few occasions, the clients love the ideas so much that they implement them. And so what that means is you're leaving this program with work that is actually live and out there, either on the internet or in someone's app. And that's a pretty awesome thing to be able to say to a hiring manager. The final class on the core class line is the Portfolio Lab. In that class, you will take your multi-class project from those first 5 classes, your Capstone project from the 2 you just completed, and anything else you've developed on your own, and you'll build them in to your portfolio website, as well as a deck that you will use when you're presenting your work to a hiring manager. It's a pretty important step, obviously, to get that right and to be able to present the work in a logical, compelling way using good storytelling technique. So when a hiring manager or recruiter sees your portfolio, they like what they see and they want to call you in so you can do an interview and then show them that deck. At the conclusion of the Portfolio Lab, we will bring in some very senior level experts, and they will take a look at your work. They'll look at your portfolio, they'll hear you make a presentation, and they will score your performance on a pretty complex rubric. And the accumulated score of those sessions from all the evaluators, that becomes the determinant of whether or not you earn your certificate. And I'll tell you right now not to worry about that too much. It's very, very rare that we have a student that does not jump over that bar. So that's how those core classes lay out. Now let's drop down and look at the specialized tracks, one for content designers and one for UX designers. We're going to take a look at courses that just those of you who are pursuing the UX design certificate will take. The first one is soft skills, and actually asterisk because both UX design students and content design students will be taking this class. It's a 5-week evening class where you will learn things like time management, how to be a good collaborator, how to give a critique, and how to gracefully accept a critique. Pretty important stuff, no matter what kind of job you're going into. Next, UX design students will take a 2-part Saturday workshop on sketching for UX, and this is literally sketching with your hand because it's a great way to think your way through a problem before you commit yourself to working on the computer. And you have to be able to indicate certain gestures, like what does it really look like? How do I draw swiping from left to right or pulling down with 2 fingers? We'll show you how to do that. The next class is visual design for UX. So for those of you who've never been exposed to any kind of formal graphic design education, you will get a bit of a crash course here as we cover things like color, typography, and most important, layout as it relates to responsive layout, which is the underpinning of most websites these days. And the last class in the specialized sequence for UX designers is an advanced research topics class. We're just going to build on what you learned in that initial class on user research and show you some of the more intricate and revealing methodologies that are available to you to understand what your users are thinking and how they're going to use your product, be it a website or an app. Now let's take a look at the specialized courses that just the content design students will be taking. As I mentioned a second ago, it starts with the Soft Skills for Designers class, and in this case, as I mentioned, both you and your UX design counterparts will be taking that, learning about things like being a good collaborator, accepting critiques, giving critiques, and managing your time. You'll then move into a 2-part Saturday workshop on content strategy. Now, content strategy and content design are 2 separate things. Content strategy takes a much higher level view of all the elements that might go into a website or app. And when I say all the elements, I mean literally all of them. Could be words, of course, but also images, videos, truly anything. So content strategists concern themselves with what is called governance, and that means keeping track of all those elements, knowing where they came from, knowing if they're going to expire at some point and need to be refreshed, and who's going to refresh them. So that's the governance piece of content strategy. The other piece is assuring consistency of tone and message across all that content. And so naturally, corporations want to speak somewhat single-mindedly, or at least with a consistent voice. Content strategists are concerned with that and make sure that it happens. The next class you'll move into is probably the core class of this part of the sequence, and it's the microcopy and writing for UI. What this involves is kind of classic UX writing, which is we write the things that tell people using the app or using the website how to accomplish what they came there to do. So it's instructional copy, it's error messages, it's what's called copy for empty states. What's that? That's when you put in a search term and there is no valid answer. There are no Starbucks open after midnight in Anchorage. You got to still say something, and that's filling an empty state. So in this class, you will do lots and lots of writing examples, and you will be building your portfolio with them. Related to that is the next class in the sequence, which is on voice, tone, and writing for conversion. Voice and tone probably speak for themselves. This is how we sound, how we come off, not us personally, but the clients that we're working for. And voice is typically consistent for a single corporation. Apple has a certain voice, but they might use a different tone depending on the circumstances. So when they're introducing a new product, it might be more casual, more celebratory. But if they're telling you your credit card was rejected, that's obviously not a place for informality, and you would use a different, more serious, straightforward tone there. The other piece of this, writing for conversion, well, if you think about it, pretty much anything you're going to work on is being paid for by some organization, not necessarily a for-profit, but some organization that wants to see something happen. Maybe they want to sell something. Maybe they want you to sign a petition. Maybe they want you to join a mailing list. Any number of things. Those are called conversions, where you can actually count up, did people do what we wanted them to do? And through the adjustment of the words that you use, you can impact the conversion rates. It's obviously very important, and so we teach it to you here. So these are the core classes for the content design piece of this track. Next, we're going to take a look at the two-part Saturday workshops that both you as a content design specialist or you as a UX design specialist will be taking. The first one is a two-part Figma workshop. Figma is prototyping software, and it lets you collaboratively build prototypes that you can then subject to usability testing. What's interesting, though, is that most of the writing that is being done for websites and apps by content designers is also being done in Figma. So all of us need to know how to use this. The next two-part workshop is on design systems. If you're not familiar with that term, it makes a lot of sense once you hear about it, because these very large, far-flung organizations, they do not want, let's say, each of 100 different designers figuring out what a button looks like or what a drop-down menu looks like. So they figured it out once, and they've published it in a design system where you as the designer, be you a content designer or a UX designer, can go grab that component out of the design system. It obviously saves a lot of time, but it also assures consistency across all the things that you're building. Next comes presentation skills, and probably doesn't need a lot of explanation, because when we're doing design for a career, we have to be able to stand up in front of other people and explain our thinking and get them to accept our recommendation. That's a foreign skill for a lot of people, and so we want to make sure you're exposed to it and get a chance to practice presenting in front of others. And the final two-part workshop on that Saturday series is called Writing Case Studies. In both content design and UX design, there's a certain way of expressing how you arrived at your solution. You're going to define the user first. You're going to maybe build a persona so we understand a little bit more about that person's lifestyle. You're going to walk us through in some logical fashion, hopefully with some storytelling, to a conclusion. And we come to the same conclusion you did, that your solution is indeed a good one for our client's problem. So, writing case studies, the final workshop in the workshop series. Actually, though, there are some 90-minute workshops or presentations, call them what you will, where we're going to cover job hunting skills and career skills. We'll do one of those a quarter, maybe more, but at least one, so you'll have some great background starting early on with how to prepare yourself for that job search. So there's your course track. It's a lot to cover, hopefully in a short enough amount of time, but if you have any questions about it, of course we'd be delighted to answer them.